We are approaching 10 a.m. and in respect for everyone's time and managing expectations, I want to officially start by asking Pastor Patina, if you could open up this event in prayer, that would be great.
Absolutely. Let us silence our minds and our hearts and go to the Lord in prayer this morning. Loving God, we thank you so much for this amazing opportunity to come together and share ideas and thoughts. We thank you, God, for the technology that we can come together in these crazy times. We thank you, Lord, for every soul who is signing on right now to hear about leadership. And we surrender to you this morning, Jesus, because you are the greatest leader. You are our King. So we ask that you would lead us in this discussion. Lord, we pray that you receive the glory in all that we do, and that these young people really walk away with something that is permanent, that will help them and give them hope for their futures. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Pastor. So you guys know me, I do like to start on time, but we're going to wait just a few more minutes, just probably 2 minutes to allow people to jump on. The room is filling as we speak. And but I do certainly want to thank you and welcome you guys to the first panel discussion that we'll have for this year. We expect to have at least two more during the year, and hopefully our format is one that encourages dynamic conversation and tries to focus on hard-hitting topics that can have an impact on those that are listening. I want to welcome the folks that have joined the meeting so far. My name is Leslie Gray. If you don't know me, I'm an executive director of the Black Venture Fund. And we're hoping to have a great conversation. Hoping is always good, but I know I have confidence in that it will be something that everyone can learn from and take away from. So, thanks for attending so far. What we're going to do is kind of just, I guess, get started. I think there's a lot to talk about, but there's some front matter. So I want to kind of get through that and make sure that we have enough time for a full-bodied discussion. With that said, I want to share a little information about the purpose of this discussion. Right today, we're hoping to have like I said, a comprehensive discussion regarding effective leadership and the role leadership plays for entrepreneurship, for corporate professionals, for nonprofit leaders, and the like, and their business success. So, but before, like I said, before we start, I do want to share a little bit about the organization. So let me just share a little bit about the Black Venture Fund. We have been in operation for close to a year now. I think a year is probably the official start date. We are focusing on Black businesses, but certainly not just Black businesses. What we're really hoping is that through our programming, our executive training, our business training, and the consultation that we provide, that we can help do two things. We can advance businesses, and we can also bridge some cultural divides that have been plaguing our country, mostly in most recent years, but not just in recent years. These things aren't new issues; they're just highlighted greatly now. So, but the organization leaders, we had brought the organization about to address those two things. So what do? We provide businesses, Black businesses, with support to increase entrepreneurship through capabilities, through intense business education, sharing Christ-centered discipleship. So in particular, what we do is, like as it says, business training, expert guidance, some technical assistance, and it's in some cases access to funding. So we have a full board of directors. You'll see at the bottom there, Eugene is one of our members, and several of our members are in the room as we speak, and I encourage them to jump in and share their thoughts at any time. Our corporate sponsors were Citizens Bank of Florida and Fairwinds, and Rick Lee and Mr. Darren Woods, our board's president, really had a heartfelt discussion about the challenges we were having around the 2 years ago when during the whole George Floyd kind of incident sparked a lot of conversations. And through their conversation, long story short, this organization was brought to life. So our sponsors, again, are Citizens Bank of Florida and Fairwinds. And the board you'll see at the bottom there. And we have a spiritual advisor, Cam Triggs, who is our pastor of Grace Alive Church, who also ensures that our Christ-centered focus is not being missed in what we do as an organization. So I want to make sure that we have a healthy conversation. So before I want the panel to introduce themselves, I want to make sure that there's some housekeeping. This is a virtual session, not a typical Zoom meeting, but there, again, is participants in the background. They're not seen, but their mics are on mute. But if we encourage you, attendees, to raise your hand, ask questions in the chat box. And what we have in the background is Monet Gray, who is monitoring the chat box, and she'll react to your questions or comments and things, share them with the panel so we can get you engaged in the conversation. We'll have a few questions in the chat box for you, some poll questions, and at the end we'll have a survey that'll get you engaged. If you really feel the need to be heard, just ask to be unmuted, and we can do that as well. Yes, attendees, that we do want you to be involved. We don't just want the information to be pushed to you. We also want to pull some information from you. Okay. All right. With that said, let me allow the panel to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with Eugene. Eugene, if you can share a little bit of information about whom you are and provide the audience with some background.
Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you for this conversation, and with emphasis on the word of conversation. We're excited about it being sort of a two-way dialogue. And just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised. However, I've been in Central Florida for probably now about 22 years. Worked in a variety of industries and a variety of roles throughout my career thus far. And each of those have sort of given me different tools that I've added to my toolbox and have accumulated in my toolbox, which is sort of how I think about sort of my professional journey. Having the tools in the toolbox that you can pull out and use them when the opportunity or the need arises. So I'm really excited to sort of, talk a little bit about maybe some of my perspectives, but at the same time, hear what's top of mind. And hopefully, myself and my fellow panelists can relate experiences that we may have had, and opinions and perspectives or practices that we embrace that might be applicable or relevant. So thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Nichelle, sure. You can go ahead if you don't mind.
Good morning. First, let me please say thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am just indelibly excited about this opportunity. It is always, always, always just such a great pleasure to share and to impart this morning. So again, we do give deference not only to you, Leslie, but certainly to all of your sponsors, as well as the board members and the president of this great organization and this work that you're doing. I am Nichelle Early. I am the president and CEO of Breakforth Solutions. Incorporated. I like to think of myself as being extremely multifaceted in my life in terms of not only being president and CEO of an IT and professional services firm, but also serving in ministry as an ordained reverend, as well as just being a wife, a friend, a sister, and all of the other wonderful relational transactions that we demonstrate throughout our lives. I am looking just exceptionally forward to, as Eugene said, a great conversation this morning. It is my heart and my hope that we say something or share something that inspires you to continue to move forward in your respective journeys and in your respective roles, not only as individuals, but certainly as leaders. So good morning to all, and looking forward to a great conversation. And again, it's a pleasure to share this platform with all of these esteemed co-panelists, Pastor Ripke, as well as my brother Eugene Campbell and Executive Director Leslie Gray. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nichelle. Pastor, and certainly not least, Pastor, can you provide some background for the attendees?
Sure. Yes, I am also honored to be here. Super excited about the conversation that's getting ready to take place. I am an associate pastor at the First United Methodist Church in Oviedo. And in that role, I share with another pastor, the lead pastor, and I have the amazing opportunity, kind of one of my main roles is to be over all mission engagement in our congregation, also over all the music, and also pastoral responsibilities and preaching. So there's a lot of things going on there. But I have not always been a pastor, and I just kind of wanted to put this out there because I did not answer the call to go into full-time ministry until 2004, when I became a worship leader. And then after that, I didn't officially become accepted as a pastoral candidate in the United Methodist Church until 2013. So it's been a journey for me. But even before that, I worked at a company. I was born and raised in Columbus, or near Columbus, Ohio, but I worked in Columbus for 16 years at a company called Battelle Memorial Institute. And Battelle is a research and development company. And it was an absolute amazing place to work. I am not a technically degreed or scientifically degreed person. And so I was in an environment where I was definitely challenged a lot, but I grew. I became the manager of their Breakthrough Center right before I ended up moving to Florida. So can you guys still hear me? Hold on a second here. I'm getting there. Okay, I was getting a phone call or something and it interrupted. So anyway, I am happy to be here and to be supportive in any way that I can and kind of share some of my lessons on leadership. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you all. Thank everyone. I mean, I really appreciate you guys being here. I want to get started on the conversation. And as we, for the attendees, as we go through the topics and go through the points of the conversation we're trying to talk about, we're going to let the conversation unfold, but there'll be some questions in the chat box and poll questions that are going to be shared by Monet. And I'm encouraging everyone to chime in and give us your opinion, because I think it will help spur the conversation and get all of us in the mindset of what the panelists, what the attendees are thinking as things unfold. So I think it's important that we kind of level set the room. So let's start, right? The discussion today will be kind of flowing through premises. Like in a premise, if you don't know, is kind of like a statement of position. And as these statements are made, then we will have full-throated conversations about that. So what you have on the screen is the three premises that we're focusing on, that the last 2 years and maybe even more has really forced leaders to face new challenges that may have pushed them out of their leadership comfort levels. So, and we've had to do that in order to maintain, succeed, reinvent, And so that's the first premise. The second one is that there are going to be some predicted top leadership challenges in this year and beyond. And those come out of a report that a leadership institute provided. And the majority of those those Fortune 500, 100 company leaders have been polled, and they say that these particular challenges will be what everyone will face. And then the last premise is that as leaders, we are responsible for developing ourselves and others, and trying to figure out how to do those things to make sure that the next generation of leaders are equipped for even more of what may come ahead. So those are the three positions or three premises, and that we'll talk about. But in our pre-event discussion, we felt that we should at least have some discussion about leadership, what it is, what leadership styles and things like that, in order to level set everybody's perspective on these particular things. So the big question, what is leadership, right? That's always like the chicken and egg kind of thing, question that comes along. And, it's, some people say leadership is management, others say they're two different things. So I wanted to get some perspective of the panels about how do you define leadership? And, Pastor, if you could, let's start with you and kind of get some perspective on how you would define leadership.
Well, here's a good place to start. Can you tell when there isn't leadership? That's how I can always tell when there is the absence of leadership by the response of people and what's going on. So leadership in my mind has come in a lot of different ways. Some people, I used to think that that you had to be a skilled, like you can develop, or that you couldn't develop skills to be a leader. But I think you can develop leadership skills. But I do think that some people have a natural ability to lead, and whether they know it or not, and they just have to hone their skills. But there's always a lot to be learned with skills. And I think I'm looking at these three things up there right now: situational leadership, servant leadership, and spiritual leadership. Of course, I think that servant leadership as a pastor is definitely super important. I worked for a man years ago who did not say that he was a Christian, but he exhibited all of the servant leadership. He served me. He helped me grow. He was there for me, but that was a type of leadership. And when a decision needed to be made, he was there to make it. So, and spiritual leadership so many times is, you start with yourself and you lead by example. So I would love to hear from the other panel members on this and hear what they have to say.
You can jump in, just let's be free and active. I will, I did have some definitions on some of the styles here that I mentioned. And these are theories, right? If you've been in any type of training program or looked it up at some point, these particular styles of leadership rise to the top. And let me just kind of read the definition of what these are. Spiritual leadership was defined by a Professor L.W. Fry, as defined as comprising of values, attitudes, and behaviors that are necessary to intrinsically motivate oneself and others so that they have a sense of spiritual survival or existence through calling and membership. Now, I can't pretend to be a expert on spiritual leadership in this definition, but I'm assuming that it's the kind of leadership that is felt from within. Excuse me one second. I slant towards servant leadership. It's putting the needs of your team first. It's when you feel personally and professionally fulfilled, ensuring that they feel personally and professionally fulfilled. Those are typical, but before I go on, I jumped in too quick, but I want Eugene and Michelle to give me their thoughts. Either one of you guys can go. Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead. I'm going to ask you to jump in.
Eugene is deferring to me. I'm going to let you have that one, Eugene. Well, first of all, I think when we start talking about leadership, it is my opinion that every leader should probably vacillate between all three of what we have here on screen. When we talk about situational leadership, servant leadership, and spiritual leadership, it is my personal opinion that every leader, when we talk about spiritual leadership first, should have that set of core principles and core values that's going to inform how you demonstrate and lead people. I think it is critical that you have a set of values, whether those are biblical values or whether those are moral, inherent moral values that really serve as your foundation as to how you're going to deal with people. And so for me, that's going to be both biblical as well as it's going to be from my Southern roots of hospitality and being courteous and being kind and executing manners, because I believe we've all now experienced an environment where manners and just being kind to people has certainly been jeopardized over the last couple of years. And I am of the mind that as we talk about servant leadership, it is imperative that as leaders, we come to the table knowing that we are dealing with people. And when we are dealing with people, it is important that people feel that they're receiving something from you and that there's some level of reciprocity. And so that's where serving comes in at. You know, I think we all know of the principle. I mean, we call it the golden rule. We've called it all kinds of things, but it's really seed time and harvest. What you sow, that shall you also reap. And so as a servant, I am of the position that I sow into those who I'm expecting to follow my leadership. And then so that when we get in certain situations, as we start talking about situational leadership, they trust my voice because they understand the guiding principles that I operate by. I've already sold into them to inspire them, because going back just to my personal definition of leadership, my personal definition of leadership is that good leaders and good leadership is the ability to inspire people to willingly invest their gifts, their talents, their experiences to achieve a specific outcome. And so when you have inspired people, when you've given them your foundational principles and how you're going to lead, when you've shown them that you are there not only to just lord over them, but you're also there to serve them. And then you have set that definition, because here's what people want to know when you're talking about leadership. They want to know, what is the purpose? They want to know, where are we going? So therefore, what is the direction and what is supposed to be the intended outcome? And when you can set those things, and then you can inspire people to bring their gifts and their talents to that, which we call vision and mission in the business world, then I think there's not that absence of leadership that we so often see that Pastor Ripke talked about.
Yeah, I'm so since Michelle and I met, we are, I think, so in alignment on a lot of the things. I mean, what she said, I had written my note to myself in terms of kind of going back to the, beginning of leadership, because leadership begins with being a good follower. So it begins with followership. No one is like automatically born with the genetic code of knowing how to be a good leader. That has to be taught, that has to be witnessed and observed, and it has to be practiced. And so, when you hear this notion of, leaders are made and not born, right? That's exactly, at least how I think about it. And it always begins in this notion of, following another leader, seeing what that looks like. What they see is what they will be. And I think that, that applies in all of these three dimensions of leadership that you see up here: situational, servant, and spiritual. So, if you're not receptive and willing to, follow because the truth is that even the highest level of leaders need to have someone that they can follow, right? The CEO still has a board of directors to lean upon, for that guidance, for that listening post, and that followership, right? The president, still has a cabinet. The president of the United States has a cabinet, to sort of serve that purpose. So it's a fallacy if you think that, I'm ready to be a leader, and you're not a good listener. You're not exhibiting. Another key thing, which I think is important, is, especially that has been put into focus over the past probably 2-3 years more than ever, empathy, than just yourself. And sometimes leaders forget about demonstrating empathy and grace for themselves, right? How can you do the things that Michelle spoke about in terms of setting that vision and giving your people, what they need, and you're starving yourself in the process? That is setting yourself up as a leader for failure. So I think, a big part of leadership, especially now, is this notion of the ability to demonstrate empathy, but also to practice it and demonstrate it for yourself. So it's for your people as well as for yourself. And I think that is a key piece of, any good definition on leadership.
May I make one more comment? May I insert a comment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pastor.
Okay. I was just thinking about something. One of the things that, and I'm hearing both of you say this, which I totally agree with, about, demonstrating leadership, having grace. I started thinking about that leadership is not control. And we also live in a culture that I think worships followers. So leadership isn't so much about gaining followers. Leadership is about leading people. And like both of you have said, keeping people at the forefront of everything that we do. And it's not to elevate ourselves. Leadership is not elevating self. What it's doing is it's accomplishing something together. Yeah. And so, I started thinking about some of my worst experiences in as far as leaders. And it was the leaders who were in it for self and weren't in it really for the right reasons. So that would, it's not about manipulating people either. And so the more that we can learn about being a good leader, being a humble leader is probably one of the greatest things that a person can have as a leader is humility. So.
Thank you, Pastor.
There are a few questions in the chat. Would you like me to bring those out now?
Yeah, go ahead, Mo. Read Adrian's question.
Right. Adrian Noel asks, is it fair to think that servant leaders naturally incorporate spiritual values in what they do?
Well, I think I'm a panelist as well, so I'll chime in a little bit on this. I do. I think that when I think of servant leadership and I think of spiritual leadership, I kind of see them both in the same vein. Both of them are scripturally founded, but it's all about the slant of serving others and making sure that, from a business perspective, they're in a place where they can succeed, they're fulfilled, and they're motivated by what the vision mission might be, and that the leader and the leader's ability to foster an environment where they can achieve their goals.
Yeah. I'll just piggyback on that, and I'll play angel's advocate on that response to say, speaking as one who, again, I am dual-footed in that I stand not only in the church, but I stand in the marketplace. And I must admit that I have encountered some leaders that they are servants. They will get out there and they will give to, they'll do the cancer walk, light the night. They are the biggest philanthropists in the world. However, they are not spiritual leaders. And many of them will tell you, I am an atheist, but yet they have a humane moral fabric that they believe is inherent of themselves that they do subscribe to. So I am not certain that every person, or that it's fair to say that a servant leadership will necessarily fall in spiritual leadership. I think when we go back to looking at spiritual leadership, that is when you have been intentional about having an informed set of spiritual principles, whether that be biblical. For me, it would be that you are subscribing to and using as your foundation to fortify your serving. That's when it goes back to what Pastor Ripke was saying. That's when your serving is not about glad handing and showboating and making it about yourself. That's when you're serving because it's the right thing to do. That's when you're serving. When we go back to that colloquial saying that we've heard, what would Jesus do? That's when you're in that vein of what would Jesus do, and how you are giving of yourself and how you are serving. But we certainly see people that make servant leadership about their works. Yeah. And so I wouldn't necessarily assume that because someone flows in that servant leadership vein of leadership, that they also flow in spiritual leadership. I think it goes back to what Eugene said. All of these styles must be taught, that most of them have been demonstrated in one form or another before you finally settle into which one, or if not all three, that you flow in on a consistent basis.
Yep.
Yeah, and on that point, Ms. Early, I just would like to share a comment by Kim Battles, who said he feels that anyone who wants to be effective and credible in the Christian realm must be a spiritual servant leader. He says our leadership qualities must be nurtured and governed by the Holy Spirit to glorify God and serve others well. Okay. And so I thought that was a good comment. And there are a couple of questions from Darren Woods about leadership challenges, which I think we're going to address later in the conversation, and also conflict and communication.
Okay. So
if I could, Les, I did want to sort of, I'm sorry to, if I'm cutting you off, but I think it's also important not only to sort of talk about what leadership is in the context of how it exists in me, right? But how are you observing it, how it exists in other people? That's probably the more, that's probably the more complex situation, right? We go to work or we run businesses, we live our lives, not in a bubble, but we're interacting with all of these other people, many of whom are sort of like the visible leader, and I, put in quotes, right? The CEO or your boss or whatever the case may be, right? How does that person demonstrate leadership? How do you even observe and take inventory of their leadership, and what dimensions, such as what's on the screen amongst these three and maybe others, where do they fall within that? And that's probably more where on a day-to-day basis, you have to be eyes wide open to do that inventory. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I've had people where they just sort of, oh, you're the leader, I'm good, right? I'm the subordinate. That's completely wrong. That you are at a deficit if you approach the world and your interactions with people from that standpoint. You have to size folks up. That's just a reality. And I think that, right, that part is like so important that a lot of people don't do, or if they do it, they don't do it very well. And I think that's an opportunity for growth for all of us. I know I certainly have had to do that, where I take that inventory and I pick and choose the piece parts that are most attractive. And I think as you grow and you build your career and get better at it, that then gives you an appreciation of what sort of leadership profile resonates with me, and also, therefore, what am I attracted to? So that way you put yourself into the right culture and the right leadership environment that aligns with you and your mix, your leadership makeup. If you're in one that is exactly opposite, you will inevitably be miserable, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to change the scenery, change yourself, or something different. So
Appreciate it. Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. That is awesome. That is awesome. Awesome. All right. So before the next thing I wanted to share is this styles of leadership. We in our pre-meeting conversation, we were throwing some terms around that kind of describe different types of leadership, and these are the ones that kind of fall into a generalized bucket that could probably be used in terms of terms that are not on this list. But the bottom line is that I'm sure you all would agree that when it comes to demonstrating leadership or leadership styles, that one of these 6 type of styles is something that you're going to use as a manager, as a leader, to achieve a goal or objective, task, mission, motivate people, whatever. So the one that was mentioned by Nichelle was the empathy, right? I think that was the one that kind of resonated with me. It's not on here, but I'm sure that maybe the affiliative or coaching topic might fall into that. But the bottom line, tell me if you agree that one of these 6 styles for this conversation is something that a leader will display, use to achieve a goal or objective. Would you all agree? Okay, cool. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Monet to release one of the poll questions, the first poll questions. And while we kind of talk about this first premise. All right.
Yes, we have another question in the chat, and I'll release that poll from Sean Jackson. He asked if we could discuss how toxic leadership affects and harms the people or institutions that it was originally intended to serve, and what some of the blind spots are that keep leaders from seeing that their leadership has or is becoming toxic.
Okay, well, I think we can keep that in mind as we talk through this premise.
Okay.
Right. So I think that what the premise is leaders have been forced to face new leadership lessons in order to endure, reinvent, or succeed in this unprecedented business landscape. And when I talk about unprecedented landscape, we're talking about COVID, we're talking about distributed teams, we're talking about economic pressures, we're talking about the different things that the environment has put, or the different pressures that the environment has put on leaders, and still having responsibility to maintain their businesses. So the question I have is that can you guys share a critical crisis that you have faced that has created unique leadership challenges? And did it teach you anything or stretch you in any way? I'm going to start with Eugene.
So critical crises, I guess I think about this in terms of, I don't know if critical crisis is sort of like the right temperature scale, but there have been multiple times throughout my career where I've been dissatisfied or frustrated or just not feeling it. I suppose it could have been a critical crisis based on how, and I guess how I'll relate it to a critical crisis based on how I approached sort of like that situation and that climate that I was in the moment. Could have been, the outcome could have certainly precipitated and created a critical crisis for me. Personally, professionally, impacting my family, everything. And that's just life. And so having the ability to sort of like, realize when you're in that situation but being able to sort of pause and say, I don't want to be in that space, right? I don't feel good in that space. I know I am, better, than that space, or I'm destined for better than what's being provided for me. And I guess that's where sort of like that quote that I shared that I think Les, put out there in terms of that notion of, when the fear of the status quo, it becomes less than the fear of change, right? That's when you've got to do something different. That's that internal alarm system avoiding the critical crisis, from my opinion. And so there have been numerous occasions where I've had those moments. A lot of times that causes you, and sort of from a most recent standpoint, it was sort of that awakening, that led me to sort of say, hey, I want to do some things different. I want maybe a different alignment, within the environment in which I'm in at work, that maybe led to me seeking other opportunities beyond where I was at that prior place. And nothing that was wrong with it, in the grand scheme of things, but I knew that there was more that I wanted. And so I think that, that's that example in my mind of, sort of like that leadership challenge, that you have to sort of like, demonstrate. And it's not always sort of like, another leader. It might be, in my opinion, it was me. It was internal, and I had to sort of like stretch myself, and I had to, go out and practice learning some things in order to put myself in that different place.
Yeah.
So I know that my critical crisis might not, merit. I mean, it wasn't life and death, right? But it was intrinsically tied to sort of like my livelihood and my future, opportunity to, do the things that I want to do and how I want to do it.
I certainly would love to piggyback off of that, because I think Eugene has brought out so many different facets and tenets in that response that I think it warrants us to look at the landscape and the environment in which we're in right now, which we're all in the ultimate critical crisis, which was this COVID pandemic. I don't believe any of us was expecting a pandemic. And so when we talk about a critical crisis, I think as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as pastors, as those just starting a business, I think it's essential that we pull back just a little bit in that conversation and let's elevate it to understanding this. There's a difference between crisis management and risk management. Pre-pandemic, we all typically were flowing in risk management, and risk management is that identification of potential things that might pop up, and we already were prepared to have our mitigations. In terms of our leadership style, we were flowing in that democratic leadership style, letting everybody have a say. We were, pace setting, saying this is what we got to do and we got to get it done now. But then when crisis hit, something that we were not expecting, a crisis is something that comes up, it's unexpected, and now you have to respond. And so crisis management has everything to do with the leader's response versus risk management has everything to do with the identification of risk and your ability to mitigate before they happen. Crisis management, okay, this has happened, we wasn't expecting it, and so now we're in it. And so I think then as leaders, what happened for me personally is that we woke up one day and on March 20th of 2020, crisis happened and we were in a full-fledged pandemic. And so it caused me then to say, I can't keep with this pace-setting leadership style. I can't keep saying, okay, these are the objectives and we have to get it done. I can't demonstrate and vacillate between coercive, where I am telling people this has to be done right now. I had to then all of a sudden on a pivot, shift to being affiliative, that leadership behavior that basically says that we have to now care for people. We now have to raise people above the objective, although that's that's what I inherently do as a person, but now the degree of that has to be priority for me. Not only does the degree have to be a priority for that for me, now I got to coach people through this. So whereas I would have been enforcing policies and procedures, and this is the policy and the procedures, now I got to even go back and look at my policies and procedures, because I got people that are scared. I got people that are calling me up, employees calling me saying, my mom just passed away from COVID. I didn't expect this. You know, my mom and my dad in the hospital sick. Ultimately, it then comes to my yard as president and CEO of this organization when one of our employees dies on her couch with her laptop and badge in hand because she refused to go to the hospital after she told us she was going to go when we did a welfare check on her. And 2 days later, when we didn't hear back, we assumed she was in the hospital. And I finally said, okay, somebody please call her next of kin and just verify that she went to the hospital, she's in the hospital, you know, what is it, so we can know how to respond and how to react. Now, pre-COVID, we might have said, well, we probably wouldn't even consider initially to do the welfare check. We probably would have, most leaders and most, you know, business people would have said, oh, I wonder if this is job abandonment. Well, COVID made us say, I wonder if she's all right. All to find out that she was not all right. And when our sister went to her home, found her on the couch, deceased with her laptop in hand. Now, as president and CEO, I got to figure out how am I going to respond, because I got several different things coming at me. One, my employees are up in arms. Two, we still got to meet the objectives that the government has told us to meet. And then three, I got people that I got to determine how I'm going to not only backfill that position without seeming like I don't have empathy, but yet meeting my contractor obligations, but taking care of my people. And so now you got to bring a convergence of all those sounds. I got to show up and be calm, even though my heart is broken as a leader. And going back to what Eugene was talking about earlier, that empathy thing, let me give a shout out. That was all Eugene, Leslie. You credited that to me, but that was Eugene that brought that up, by the way. But now I got to really flow in empathy because people are hurt. People are disappointed. Every time my phone rings, I don't know the next employee that's getting ready to call me and say, my mom passed, my dad passed, my brother, my sister. And that's what we were dealing with. And as leader, we still have to get work done. So now it's that place of we're in a critical crisis. And how do we move through this? How do we coach people through this? How do we care for people through this? And how do we still lead people and inspire them to still meet the objectives that we have to meet, even in the midst of crisis, even in the midst of hurt, even in the midst of disappointment, even in the midst of talking to my mentees who are getting ready to start businesses and now everything is on hold. Talking to new entrepreneurs that had their business plan and now they can't get a hold of their banker, either A, because the banks have shut down and they can't come in, they got to make an appointment and there's a waiting list. We've all been impacted by this. And so it was my hope and my desire that it provoked in me. And this is where our spiritual foundation and our moral fabric comes back. How are we going to really, really, really apply who we are as leaders to help other people and to serve people in this time, in this situational context?
Pastor, before you chime in, I wanted to share some results. Can everybody see this?
Yes, I can. You're on mute, Les.
Most folks are leaning toward more affiliative, democratic, pace-setting styles of leadership in terms of what they use and what is effective on them, which is great. Some folks are in the authoritative but less coercive, even though coercive is needed in most critical situations, like a commander of the army is going to tell the guys to take the hill and do it now. But this is interesting. Thank you, folks, attendees, for sharing this.
Hey, you went back on mute, Les.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me take this off.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I love the results, but, I'm also mindful of the fact that the way we see ourselves is oftentimes different than how others see us.
Oh my God, that's so true.
Right. And so, we don't have this opportunity to explore that here, but all of the people who responded to your survey, I would encourage you to actually ask people who are in your orbits and networks and deal with you on a day-to-day basis. It could be family and loved ones. It could be coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you show up?
Yeah.
Do you even know? Are you even conscious and aware of how you show up?
Yeah.
And everyone who has ever worked with me or for me, they know I have this premise of, or practice of, putting the mirror up to yourself, because, sometimes they'll ask me for questions, or they'll ask me questions for answers. And I'm like, I think, I empower you. I think you know the best answer. So bring it out. So I sometimes, back in the old days, I'd have a mirror in my desk drawer, and during our one-on-one sessions, I'd pull the mirror out and put it right up to their face. But people aren't naturally conscious of how they show up. So I just encourage you to maybe take Leslie's poll questions and ask others, because I bet some of you who, I didn't see anybody on the coercion side, but I bet some of you out in, internet land show up really coercive. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Pastor, I wanted you to, kind of answer this question here, but I also wanted to add a little, if it's applicable to like the difference between leading in crisis and factoring the female aspect, the associate pastor aspect, not actually the lead. Add a little bit more to it for that. And Nichelle, if something inspires you to speak on that, please do so as well. Okay, Pastor, if you can.
Yes, thank you. Well, first, when I think about the role that I have in my congregation right now, I work very closely with the lead pastor in a crisis, in the crisis that we have been in for a few years now. We have had to be so lockstep, in pace with one another, knowing what the other's thinking, gaining insight from literally, if you're not together, the whole thing will fall apart, because somebody's going to find a crack and they're going to get in, and it's just going to destroy everything. So that's what I would say. Number one, during the time of this crisis, and I want to go into some of the things I really felt during that time, I didn't so much sense anything that was bothersome or troublesome with respect to me being a woman. Now, before that, I'm a pastor in Oviedo, Florida, who's a woman. That is a very unique position to hold. And there have been times when I've been left out or ignored or kind of looked at side eye, what are you doing there? I don't care. I've been through a lot of my life. I'm like, no, this is me. This is what God's called me to do. So you guys can figure out what's going on in your own head. So there's all that. But I do want to say that, and I'm going to be super transparent with you guys, because COVID, when it first hit, I had just come back and returned from a trip to Uganda. It was like this amazing, we were preaching to people and in prisons. And it was amazing. And I come back and we're on the plane and we're talking because we'd heard about the virus. And then literally like a few weeks after we get back was the shutdown. The shutdown occurred during Holy Week, running into Easter. In a million years and different scenarios, I never would have imagined that the church would not gather on the highest day of worship ever. And so I remember having all of those feelings. What does it mean? How are we going to do this? And we did. Nichelle, you were talking about pivoting. You have to change. You have to reset. Your mind is like in chaos. You don't even know what you're going to be doing the next day. You just I literally put in I feel like triple time. It's like, okay, This is where it is. This is the crisis. Am I going to practice what I preach? Do I really believe what I say? So we get into all of that. We start basically, we're in this series now called Reconstruction. Well, this was a deconstruction. This was like, let's rip everything down to the basic core of nothingness. And what's your foundation? Well, we thought that we had reached our foundation, and then everything, and I'm gonna be honest with y'all, everything else happened, right? We had the political climate. We had the election that was destroying everything. I mean, my church is mostly, we're not super diverse in ethnicity and race. We are very much a majority white culture. However, we're split politically, like more than, it's shocking. Split politically. There are some moderates, but anyway, to make a long story short, it caused massive, massive division in our congregation. George Floyd, when all that happened, massive fighting, arguing, people calling me, both sides of the spectrum, wanting me to stand up and make a statement. And it got really real. And I'll be honest, I mean, it makes me emotional right now. Like, I had to evaluate me. So when you have to evaluate you as a leader, you're praying that everybody's doing that. Not everybody's doing that. So as a leader, I had to evaluate every decision, every thought, everything that I was doing and saying. And not only was I evaluating, everybody else was evaluating. And so I say all that because sometimes leadership, you happen to be the person who's like up there, and everybody's evaluating, and you have to be confident and caring and understanding of where other people are, and try, because in a church, division is bad, right? Division, not cool. Diversity, good. Diversity, good. Division, bad. So the goal was, we can be diverse and be one. We can have different thoughts, but we can still love God together. You know, so that was kind of where everything was pointing. It was devastating. It's still super hard. It's painful. But I had a group of people that we just got down in the trenches together and prayed together and walked together and cried together, and were, in this battle. It literally felt like there was a battleground on the property of my church. So I won't go into all of it, but it was hard. But that's when your leadership style is challenged, and you can become a much better leader coming out of it. I'll say that.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you guys see the poll that was taken about leadership comfort levels? No, I'm not sure but anyway, we asked the question about, forgive me. We asked the question to everyone, whether their scale of 1 to 5, if their leadership abilities were pushed to the limits over the last several years. And either everyone who responded said, of course, moderately, or very much, or extremely. So split down the middle, but nobody was impacted very little or not at all. Everyone had some level of their leadership stress throughout this year. And I think that, that's why this conversation was so important, and you guys sharing your instances was so relevant. So I appreciate that. But everybody definitely has had some leadership challenges that put them out of their comfort zone. So that's great, which leads us to the next premise. And as we go on, I do definitely want the perspective of color, gender, other things that kind of that added to the stress of your leadership. So I think we've can move to premise 2. Okay. And Okay, so I mentioned this report, and I shared the report amongst the panel previously about this report that's predicting the top 4 leadership challenges that will be faced by most organizations and most leaders in the this year and beyond. And they are leadership challenges in terms of developing future leaders, economic pressures in terms of, lack of capital or other things of that nature, the right people for the right job, and also product art. And all these are going to be hardships that most organizations, no matter where you are going to face over the next year or so. So the question I have for you guys is that as we look at these challenges, what does a future challenge in terms of these things look like for your firms, for yourself as leaders, and then what leadership styles will you deploy in order to address some of these things? Does that make sense? So I'm going to ask Nichelle this time to start off this part of the conversation.
Thank you, Leslie. May I just ask you really quickly, there was a gentleman or someone, I apologize, that had a question about toxic leadership.
Yes.
Can we please hear that question again? Because I don't want us to get too far and not address that question. I would like to hear that question again and then address that question in the context of future challenges, because I think that question fits nicely here. So, Ms. Gray, do you have that question from that participant, please?
Yes, ma'am. We can discuss how toxic leadership affects and harms the very people or institutions that it was originally intended to serve. And what are some of the blind spots that keep leaders from seeing that their leadership has or is becoming toxic?
Okay, thank you. I would like to say Pastor Ripke's response definitely answered that question. In terms of, I believe when we talk about toxic leadership, when we as leaders don't continue to self-evaluate and evaluate our own thoughts and continue to evaluate where we are, whether it's in our spiritual fabric, our moral fabric, or our situational fabric, if we don't continue to do that self-evaluation, toxicity can get in. And toxicity can be from aligning with ideas that probably are not healthy or that do not serve the greater good. We are in a time, I believe, where there is such a diversity of thought. I'm a reverend, so I have to use a scripture. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, but such a way therein is death. I mean, many people have their ways that seem right unto them. And I think we've come to that precipice of time where I do believe, going back to what Pastor Ripke said, it is so important as leaders for us to do everything we can to quell division, because with a divided house cannot stand. And so I think some of our future challenges and what it looks like for our firm is going back to what Eugene said, is developing leaders. We don't wake up knowing how to do this. I didn't wake up knowing how to be a president and CEO. I didn't wake up knowing how, sometimes even though I already have my mind made up on how I think it should go, sometimes I got to step back and be a little democratic and get ideas that's in the room, because oftentimes an idea from one of my team members bubbles up and is better than what I had already planned and made my mind up to be. And so I think going forward, some of the future challenges is, like Pastor Ripke say, weeding through the division that we are all experiencing right now. I think social media has presented an environment where people now have the opportunity to be way more vocal than they ordinarily would have. I call it keyboard courage. Oftentimes people will say on social media what they absolutely will not say in your face. People all have opinions and thoughts now. And instead of having that opportunity to really weigh your thought and evaluate your thought, research it, make sure it's founded and backed by substance, people will have a thought and immediately put it on social media. And whether it's good, not good, whether it's right or not right, you know, depending on the place of the recipient and where they are in their mindset, they will receive that and accept that. We saw that happen just again throughout the election cycle. We've seen it throughout history. I don't even want to relegate it to necessarily one election cycle, because we see it through all election cycles, whether it's Republican or Democrat or independent or purple people eater. We see that there's always going to be a diverse set of opinions. So I think in terms of styles and tactics and behavior, I think it goes back to what Eugene said, just being empathetic, but certainly being democratic, but certainly being coaching and really listening. I think somebody talked about active listening. My last thing there, Joseph Simmons sent me a chat in the participants. I'm one of those leaders. I watch everything in my environment. And Joseph said, but to Nichelle, leadership is very situational, where you have to flex based on the need at the time. I absolutely agree. And I certainly hope that my example, when I talked about the employee that passed away and how we had to be flexible with our policies and procedures, how that situation caused us to have to pivot. I hope that I answered your question and substantiated that I absolutely agree with you. Leadership is absolutely something that we all have to be flexible in which style, which behavior, and which attributes that we're going to demonstrate for each situation.
Great. Can I invite Eugene or Pastor Patina to share? And what I guess what I'm looking for is like, okay, so my organization is looking for new people next year. So we're going to have to, you know, do X or demonstrate X in order to meet that objective. I'm going to try to put a
Pastor Patina, you are on mute. I saw you speaking.
You can go ahead if you want, Eugene, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. You know, this premise for me, it brings to mind a number of things. You know, in particular, it brings to mind that we all have to remind ourselves that, you know, these challenges and everything that we're facing, each of us, those challenges are going to be framed within the construct of how we each individually, you know, view the world. And people are shaped by their environments, yet not everybody has the same life experience. And so they can't have, they're likely not to have always the same values and the same principles and the same convictions. And I mean, this goes back for me, you know, like from a business standpoint and professional standpoint, this is another one of the ways in which I take inventory of the people that I interact with. You know, can they appreciate my life experience, even if they've not lived and my life experience in the same way, right? And I think that's what's so missing right now, the willingness to appreciate someone else's life experience. And quite honestly, I'm trying hard not to get political, but the reality is that we don't even want to have the conversation. We want to create laws that silence this notion of different life experiences so that we can recalibrate the conversation on values, principles, and all of and everything. So, when I don't expect everybody to have that same life experience. And it's okay to say, I don't know, especially for a leader. It's okay to not say, it's okay to say, I don't know everything. It's okay to be uninformed. However, The important part is when you know you're uninformed, what in the world are you doing to get informed? If you don't stay stuck on stupid, don't stay stuck in the uninformed mode when you know you're uninformed. Seek out education, seek out knowledge, perhaps seek out people who have those different life experiences so that you can hear from them and learn from them just as they can learn from you. And that's what we really need to get back to. And I'm amongst I'm amongst two panelists who are subject matter experts, in the Bible and in the Word of God. But I know that God kind of gave me a nugget. Actually, yesterday, I try to read a Bible verse every day. And by faith, yesterday, this is the one, let me put my glasses on, that came to me, and it's Romans 12, verse 3. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. This is basically the Bible telling us how to behave on this very topic, right? Where's the sober judgment? Where's the humility? Don't get too full of yourself. I don't think of myself as like the most brilliant, the most anything. We need to demonstrate and practice that professionally, personally, just in every piece of our lives. And, I think that's sort of like, a key thing. For me, in the role that I serve, I've as a leader of supplier diversity, I don't own the sort of budgets, for example, or the money associated that gets contracted through procurement, and purchase orders and those sort of things. So I have to figure out, and I have to be mindful of the fact that, however, I do embrace my responsibility of persuasion as opposed to imposition. So I can persuade, I have to take a style of persuading and influencing as opposed to imposing. That's my leadership track, right? That's what I have to do and figure out how to do it as well as I can, that then yields sort of like, betterment for others and also for myself. But if I get too full of myself, then I can't function appropriately.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Hey,
Nice.
hey, Les, if I could interject here, Darren, quite a while, Mr. Woods put in the chat a while back that, cultural assumptions, how do cultural assumptions and behavior play a role in leadership identity? And I think that's a lot of what Eugene was kind of talking about, how our cultural assumptions and how we behave culturally impact our leadership identity. And he also asked at the same time, what lessons learned or experiences could they share as Black, brown, and women leaders?
Can I take a crack at that? Because this is really hitting on a nerve for me because it's very real time. I think that, right, a lot of people who are quote unquote leaders, a lot of them come from very privileged circumstances, and therefore they don't recognize or have an appreciation for those who don't have those same privileges and luxuries. I think there's an opportunity not only for them to open themselves up, but then I think there's an opportunity for us to get far more engaged than we have ever been in showing them and telling them, offering ourselves as opportunities to say, let me introduce to you or explain to you another perspective that maybe you can't appreciate because you don't have that life experience. A lot of the folks in corporate America that are sitting in the C-suites come from, right, they are themselves multimillionaires and billionaires. They come from families that have that. That's all they know, right? It's up to us maybe to say, hey, you have that perspective, but there's an and to the perspective, not a but. The and could be, let me explain to you another side so that you take that into appreciation and consideration and or with or alongside what you think or know to be true. Don't just rely on that by itself, because it represents maybe a perspective that is narrow. So people of color, women, all dimensions of diversity, that's an opportunity and a call to action for us to maybe be more engaged and more outspoken to share those perspectives with some other people to hopefully, help open their eyes to what they don't even know to exist.
Would you like me to?
Just 1 second. We released another poll that I'm encouraging the participants to answer. Is like, of these predicted challenges, which one do you think you are least prepared for in the coming years?
Okay. I'd like to address some of these things. And Eugene, you said a word that I think is really important when we think about the future, which is opportunity. So we can be thinking that the opportunity is bleak, but a leader is one that sees, or the future is bleak, but a leader is one who sees the future as an opportunity for change or adjustment. And I'm going to get kind of preachy a little bit, but if anybody is passionate about the scriptures, one of the greatest leaders in the Bible is Nehemiah. And so we're doing a whole series going through the book of Nehemiah right now, because Nehemiah is a fantastic leader. And one of the things that he's charged with doing is rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, because it lies in ruins and it's a disgrace. So what I've done, we started this series in January called the Reconstruction Zone. And so I kind of feel like that's what this is. Like these things, like how do we reconstruct the way business is, or how do I reconstruct and rethink the church and how we as a church, and how do I as a church leader consider major changes that need to happen. And some of the things that I was thinking about, and I love these categories, I think they're right on point. And it's very kind of different for me, but when we lost, not only did we go through all the stuff that happened in 2021 or 2020, 2021, but we also lost 3 major people who resigned literally within 2 weeks last summer in a critical time period. And so we all got together in leadership and said, okay, let's not rush into anything. Let's not panic. Let's not think we have to go out and hire people immediately. Let's rethink what we're looking for, and then make choices that are based on through prayer and faith and trusting God. Because it's so important. I think now the people, finding good leaders that you're willing to invest in, finding people who, let me put it this way. People have a propensity, or I don't know if that's the right word, predisposition, when things aren't going well, to begin a negative verbiage. And so there's these underlying things that can happen where people start talking at water coolers, or people start Zooming and doing private messages on the Zoom call, and they're going back and forth with negativity. So you have to have people who will fit into the culture that you are going to set before them. And it takes time to find the right people. And then after you find them, like being willing to pour into them. And also, I think that as far as economic challenges, the leaner we are, the better we are. And that means a lot of different things. And you guys, for each business, will be different. But I would also say not sacrificing for the sake of just saving money, like being able to invest for the future, whatever that's going to be, if you possibly can. And as far as products go, as a church leader, I have to be open-minded and creative more than I ever have before. I'm a visionary. I'm an idea person. But listen, it's a new day. And as far as the church goes, I don't think we're ever going to go back to what we were. It can never go there. So my whole thing is, let's go back to the way it was when it first started, but also have like some additional things. So just keeping an open mind, and the future is wonderful. It's challenging, but it's time to reconstruct how we do things. Leslie, you're muted.
Oh my goodness. All right. So the question was, Nichelle, did you get a chance to chime in on this one?
I did not, but I think Pastor Ripke summed it up. I think a lot of the tenets that she just shared with us are cross marketable. I mean, I think we're all, as leaders in whatever organization you are in, dealing with many of those same things. I mean, for us just to kind of touch to the heart of what I believe I heard you say earlier, Leslie, you wanted us to talk about, how are we going to, if we are hiring employees and what are we going to do that? So I'll address that in that is going to be challenging, because employees have shifted their mindsets, particularly in my industry of government contracting here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. We have major highways that people had to sit on pre-COVID for 2 and 3 hours just so that they can get to work on time. People were in metro stations waiting and crowded in metros and almost pushing people down to get on the metro because you couldn't afford to miss that train or you would be late. And so now the government realized that they could be a little flexible in their demonstration of work objectives, and they allowed people to work from home. Well, now our challenge is people are like, I'm not going back in that government building. I'm not sitting on 66 for 2 hours. I'm not getting on 495 to go to work anymore because I can do what I've been doing with the government from home, particularly the unclassified objectives. And so now it's, how do we motivate? Because the government is not going to allow a bunch of buildings to just sit empty. So they are going to ask people to come back. Yeah. And it's the same thing even with church. Our sanctuaries have been empty. We've been doing Zoom, we've been doing virtual. So what is the next phase? What does that look like? And so the challenge is going to be, how do we inspire? How do we motivate? How do we, really pull on the gifts, the talents, the ideas, the abilities, the diversity of thought of people as to what the next move looks like? And so it is going to be challenging. I've had people say to me, well, I've been working from home for these last 2 years during the pandemic. If I have to go back to the building, you got to give me more money. Well, guess what? Our contractual rates are already set. So I don't have the flexibility to give you more money to go back to a job that I didn't take money from you when I let you come home and work from your house. You're getting the salary that I paid you to be in the building, but now you want more to go back to the building. So it's trying to navigate those things without losing your institutional and historical knowledge. But for me, and being empathetic to, I understand. I don't want people to sit on the highway either. It just really showed us people's quality of life. And I feel that the people have been much more productive from a work perspective being at home because they were more refreshed. They were more relaxed. Now, they were more productive, but also the result of that is people have sat to their desks 8 straight hours and not taken the mental breaks that they would have gotten had they been in a car, had they been on a metro, had they been at the office to go to lunch with coworkers. Yeah. And so it's just, we're going to have to figure out and use our different leadership styles to address and resolve those challenges in this upcoming space. And I think, again, that is for church. How are we going to get people to come back to the sanctuary? Is that a hybrid approach? Is that a, home cell approach? Is that a, do Bible study on Zoom, but only Sunday morning, or a Sunday morning, where you have Zoom and you have sanctuary attendance? It's all of those things that I think we have to, they're going to be challenges to work through, but we have to do it in a very empathetic, but certainly democratic manner, I think, because people have some strong opinions that probably need to be considered.
Yes. Here is some results of that question. We asked the attendees what they think that they're least prepared for. And the two that rise to the top are the economics and people, right? I mean, we're going to have to deal with trying to make sure that we have enough revenue in a economy or a situation that's putting pressure on that, and the right kind of people and talent that we can deliver our promises as business owners. So So that's definitely interesting. I appreciate the participation on that. Did you have something you want to add to that, Eugene?
The only thing that I love how both Patina and Michelle, really, summarized it. I think the only thing I would add is clearly as leaders, we can't be as prescriptive as we used to be.
Yeah.
I think we used to be in a mode where we tried to prescribe, the scenario, the actions to the scenario, have it so thought out and prescribed. That's gotten thrown out the window. So as we sort of recover to whatever we recover to, clearly that is going to be a lot less prescriptive. Michelle used the word hybrid, and we're going to that's what we have to try to figure out. I think that's the paradox of the new form of leadership, finding the right mixture of and balance of not being overly prescribed, but yet, providing what is needed for all of us to accomplish our, mutual objectives and interests.
I have a follow-up. I know you guys are in your different roles, but I'm sure you're not unfamiliar. What do you think small businesses, the big challenges for small businesses will look like? I mean,
I don't speak since I think I'm the small business on here.
Yeah.
It's certainly going to be people. It's going to be talent. It's going to be retaining talent. I mean, I'll go back again to my example of I have, in terms of how I've built Breakforth Solutions, it has been very intentional to be diverse, probably in every way imaginable. And so with that being said, I have some wonderful, what we call our senior professionals, where they could have retired a long time ago, but because they enjoy what they do and they still feel as though they demonstrate value, and as do I, they've remained. But they've told me, if we have to go back to that building, I'm gonna retire, So I'm already in fast forward thinking about, as a small business, this is my institutional and historical knowledge. These people know my customer. They know, even from a business development perspective, I can call up one of my people, what I call my senior professionals, and they'll tell me, oh, well, such and such used to be in that position. And then when he left, such and such got it and such and such got it. So I would call him and see what he got to say, because he can tell you X, Y, and Z. And so albeit I'll still have access likely to them because of our relationships we've built, but certainly to lose that day-to-day operational knowledge and talent, and then now be put in a situation of the business decision I have to make. Because we all know that when someone stays in a position for a very long time, their compensation also increases, right? So now the business decision is, do I get somebody back at that compensation, or am I in a cost savings opportunity where I can then get somebody at a lower cost to do that same work because they're not as experienced, they're not as tenured, and what is the impact to the operations to make that decision? Yeah. So, we have some challenges as small businesses, and I have an appreciation, certainly, and even getting out of government contracting, but I have an appreciation for the restaurant industry. They have some challenges, getting people back. They've had to be flexible and, signing up for delivery services, or, only being open a certain amount of hours. We have the great resignation on our hand where people are like, what, I'm done. I'm going to work for myself, and I'm like, I don't need none of my engineers to be done. I need them to stay. Yeah. However, given the person that I am, I want to support them in their dreams too. I don't want to be like, well, I get to be a business owner. You got to stay right here and make my dream work, so having those transitional opportunities to work with our employees who come back to us and say, okay, I'm ready to do something on my own. So we just have a lot we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Some of the conversations I've had with a few small businesses is capital. They're wondering how to get some funding that can, sustain them and build their credit and put themselves in a solid position where they can, leverage some of the benefits that are being offered. in the marketplace. So, and talent, yes. It's like right now, a lot of the smaller businesses, I'll say, are like 1 or 2 man shops, and having to wear multiple hats is a big challenge. And then trying to find the right resources to kind of outsource some things too is a challenge. So, and the environment is just getting more complex for them. It is. But the good thing is there's a lot of organizations out there that understand these challenges and are trying to figure out how to help as well. So, okay.
Yeah, if I could jump in, because, I come at it from a similar intention as Nichelle, but from the other side, right? As an executive in a company that's looking to do business with small businesses,
right.
I do see the pie is getting bigger. And that's a good thing. That's an extremely good thing. I think through all the tragedies and the adversities that we have faced, I think there have been more companies that have embarked upon closing this missing link or this gap on how they engage small businesses, how they engage minority and women-owned and other economically underrepresented businesses. So the pie is getting bigger.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people, that's what's not being put front and center enough in the narrative, that through diversity and through more inclusion, there's actually a bigger pie to be had for everybody who's getting a slice.
Yeah.
So even those big major corporations who are getting the big slices, their big slice is only going to get bigger. And I think there's an opportunity for, the small businesses to get slices that they might have not gotten at all in the past. It remains to be seen whether this sustains itself or whether this is just sort of like a snapshot in time, knee-jerk reaction where folks took action in order to keep the heat off of them and their brands because of what was going on in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
But the pie is absolutely getting bigger. There are more corporations starting and hiring supplier diversity leaders like myself that historically I know personally could have cared less about this topic.
Yeah.
So although I don't like personally that it took these tragedies and these crises to get them to the table and get them in the game. But there is a sort of truth in terms of don't squander a good crisis in order to sort of like jumpstart and be the catalyst to where you need to be.
Right.
So I think that small businesses need to be mindful of that, and that might lend them opportunity in some of these places that are kind of dipping the toe in the water. And that becomes a new sort of population of targets that I hope that, CEOs, see and pursue vigorously going forward in the future, that address sort of, all of the topics you've got up here: leadership, economic, people, and product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and if I could just add to that, yes, that pie is certainly getting bigger on the government contracting side. So I just wanted to put a quick plug in to say, if there's a small business that is a diverse government contractor, this is a great opportunity to have your capability statement tight, because the Biden administration have passed an executive order that absolutely has increased the socioeconomic goals that not only the major government agencies now have to abide by, but certainly any of the larger contractors, both defense and non-defense, have to abide by. And so, yes, this pie is bigger. It is bigger on the commercial side. I believe that Eugene was just speaking about, and it's certainly an opportunity for us to be tight, to come in excellence, to have our capabilities down pat, to make sure we understand our past performance. I can give a shout out to one of the board members of Black Venture Fund, Jennifer Kaysen, who works for Raytheon. I'm certain that she can substantiate that those socioeconomic goals have increased, where defense contractors do have to now utilize women-owned small businesses, economically disadvantaged small businesses a lot more. So take take this time, and let me touch on something Leslie is dear to his heart. Take this time to consider your personnel. You can't hire the most experienced, but maybe get that person that is eager, that is hungry, that aligns with your values, that you can train so that you have the support and the help that you need to take advantage of these opportunities that Eugene just discussed.
Excellent. And an excellent segue to the last premise, right? This last premise talks about being equipped, and developing. So the premise is leaders must take up the mantle of continuously developing themselves and training the next generation of leaders. So we talked about, you just mentioned about small businesses being, doing some things to make sure they're prepared. So how do you stay sharp? What training tools do you use to develop yourself and others as leaders? How do you equip yourself, basically, is what I'm asking. Go ahead, Michelle, you had the floor, so keep going.
Oh, I didn't know I still had the floor. I think it goes back to, I think Pastor Ripke and Eugene said this earlier, that it just resonated with me so, and it's something that I do. It is critical that we have other leaders around us. It is critical that we are exposing ourselves to circles, into environments where, goes back to what one of my favorite scriptures, Proverbs 27:17, where it says, as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. We have to be in that posture of iron sharpening iron. And so I think, for me, I have an executive coach. For me, I actually have organizations that I'm affiliated with and that I am a part of. I think these conversations are critical to leaders staying sharp, because I get to hear the perspective of other leaders that are not in my industry, but yet the principles of leadership are the same and the crises are the same. I think also it gives me an opportunity. In order for me to stay sharp, it goes back to what Eugene said. I have to absolutely now be intentional about practicing self-care. I mean, because if I don't care for me, I can't lead anybody else. If I don't come to the table wholehearted, if I come to the table tired, if I come to the table drained, oftentimes you're not going to likely make the best decisions, wherein those decisions are mutual, where it is, again, going back to my statement earlier about reciprocity. When I make decisions, I want to make sure it's mutually beneficial, not only for me, but for whomever I'm transacting or being transactional with. I want to ensure that it's mutual. I'm a win-win kind of chick. I don't want to be in relationships or business ventures where it is not a win-win. If I walk in, if I sniff out that it is one-sided, I'm out. There has to be reciprocity in order for all of us to eat the pie and to get our fair slice. So those are some of the things that I do to stay sharp. Oh, and let me just say, there are amazing books out there too. So, just being an avid reader, I personally start with my Bible and I work my way outward. There are just so many and vast topics. Know a little bit about everything is what I encourage every leader. I've learned to read a little bit about the stock market, so I know what's going on in the stock market. So if I get to a business meeting, I don't want somebody talking about the stock market and I'm sitting there looking crazy and don't even know what it is, what it do, and why. Know a little bit about just a little bit about some industry so that you can be well-rounded and be able to have conversations, because you just never know when an opportunity may come up, where you are able to really demonstrate who you are, as well as demonstrate the capabilities of your business.
Ooh, Sister Early dropping the mic, man.
Oh,
you just dropped the mic. I'm a win-win kind of chick. That is like the quote of the day, right there. Because I hope folks really took note. You need to be a win-win kind of chick, a win-win kind of dude, because it's all about how you stay sharp is recognizing that we are in this sort of like collaborative culture more than any other time in history. The interconnectedness is for real. It's not going to change. It's going to get more critical. And you better learn how to identify sort of which environments have that sort of right collaborative cultural mix for you to go after and try to play within. And, you know, for me as a leader, that's what I'm really trying to like sharpen my acumen. I don't have to pick every fight. I don't have to be in every battle. So I got to pick and choose, and I'm picking and choosing on, in one way, sort of like which ones have that collaborative spirit where, once again, I can be on more, so I can have more effect on that persuasive influence tip that I talked about earlier, as opposed to being on this command and control tip, right? That's how I'm sort of putting it into practice, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And I think how you can know whether your environment has that collaborative culture is, you know, is it a place where, for example, amongst your team members, you know, is it a ethos or a value of we will not let each other fail, as opposed to you better not fail? I've been in corporations where it's about you better be perfect, you better be buttoned up, you better not fail before you even start out the gate. However, failure is great. Most of the most successful disruptive companies, like the one that I work for, and some of the others, they failed and failed and failed, and look at them now, because they take a premise of fail, but fail fast. Learn from the failure, iterate and improve, and we're not going to let each other fail. The flip side of that is we're going to win together. That's the collaborative culture. Are you asking your environments, or if you're a business owner, are you asking yourself, are you building that into your business? And if you're not, you need to be doing something different, right? Because it's about that shared value, that common purpose and objective that, you know, that is, you know, we've all given examples of. So you just set me on fire.
Do you do any job related or training aspects, Eugene? Does Netflix or your companies require you guys to do like, you know, 10 credits of professional development, things like that?
Yeah, they have what they call training nudges. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the power of words, they call it a nudge as opposed to a requirement. Mm-hmm. A nudge basically says, I'm kind of giving you a push, right? It's more encouraging as opposed to, once again, you better, mm-hmm. right? So they offer training nudges. I mean, you understand the intention. You know clearly that, right? We can tell ourselves, okay, nudge, I know I better do it. But I'd rather me tell me I better do it as opposed to somebody else, right? That therein lies the psychological difference. And so, you know, a lot of that content that they nudge us on, you know, includes, you know, these opportunities to learn, you know, to read, you know, I mean, it's just really immersing yourself into what is out. There's so much that's out there. The problem is that we individually sometimes don't take the effort ourselves to digest it and to immerse ourselves in it. Yeah. Michelle just gave excellent examples on the stock market. I mean, that's just the way of the world. Not going to change, you know. I mean, it's not going to change. Companies are going to acquire, they're going to consolidate more power, more wealth. You know, I mean, we have to be subject matter experts on the world and environment around us in order to demonstrate our leadership to help shape and influence that future that we're going to be part of, or if not in our lifetime, you know, that our children and generations behind us are going to be part of.
Yeah.
That's what happened generations before us that have given most of us on this call the type of opportunity for success that we have in the positions that we're in.
Right.
We got to do the same thing, paying that forward.
Right.
And a lot of us aren't doing what we should be doing.
Right. I want to give Pastor Bettina a chance to, of course, but I want to share these results first. We asked the poll of the participants or the attendees, what do they use most to develop themselves as a leader? And it appears that formal professional training programs rise to the top. Job-related development assignments are the least, but it may be a function of more entrepreneurs on the panels than full-time employees or corporate professionals. So that was interesting. Pastor, can you tell me, as a what do you do personally, and what do you recommend for others to stay sharp, continue to advance yourself in your role?
Yeah. First of all, I am passionate about learning. I always have been. I'm in class right now. I'm in an evangelism class. I mean, I'm always doing something. And I'm also passionate about going to conferences where people maybe feel differently than I do. I'm part of this. I'm not part of an organization, but I watch and participate in a podcast. It's called Q Ideas. And I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but I went to Nashville right after the last election because I knew they were going to be talking about some really hot topics. So I'm like, all right, I'm going in. You kind of have to have this attitude of, I'm not scared of different ways of thinking. I'm going to go in, I'm going to see what's going on. But I've learned so much from having that attitude. But I would say, podcasts, I'm obsessed with YouTube channels. I watch, and everybody makes fun of me because I watch so many, like when I'm getting ready in the morning, when I'm in the car, whatever, I hear a bunch of stuff. And let me just say, there's some crazy. So you have to kind of manage what you watch, who you allow into your space. But I also, this is going to be maybe weird to say, but I decided to protect my mind and protect my heart. So I don't watch the news. I do not watch any news. I read the news and I select my news sources from a variety of different points of view because it was hindering me. So you have to decide what messes with my mind and causes me to be negative. You guys were talking about, we've talked about earlier about hanging around people. I don't mind hanging around people with diversity of thought, but I do not hang around people who are negative. We're talking about toxic people, those people who can bring you down in a second and now you're down in the ditch somewhere and you're like, how did I get here? Well, maybe we should evaluate who we're hanging out with and who we're allowing to influence our thinking and that kind of stuff. Those are just kind of a high level. I think that we can keep, when we are passionate about learning and allowing ourselves to hear other ways of thinking and learnings, then we'll only grow. I mean, it will never hinder us. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I was looking at something in the chat box that Darren Woods shared. Before, I think he's asking you to share a little bit about can you read that in the show? Do you see it?
Yes, it looks like, thank you, Mr. Woods. It says, Nichelle or any other panelist, as a small business founder or owner, you have shared a few ingredients to your secret sauce. Can you share with us your story in terms of preparation from startup to present? What is your company's value proposition? How did you become such a great marketer? Wow, that's a loaded question.
And that's a lot. And as a facilitator, we got 10 minutes to go. Eugene told me once, if nobody's leaving, then don't kick them out, that kind of thing. So if you want to share a little bit, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm going to try to see if I can just really sum that up. And please know that my responses are not exhaustive. I've enjoyed chatting with one of the panelists that has certainly continued to call me out. And it has been rewarding because I love the interaction. So I'm going to caveat my response by saying it is not exhaustive. But with that being said, overall, I think my secret sauce is honestly caring about people. Everything we do here at Breakforth is about people. Now, let me be very clear. A lot of companies jump out there and say, our people are our greatest asset, and they don't mean it. It just sounds good. Where here at Breakforth, we built that into everything. We built that into our culture statement, which is, and our leadership model, which is on our website. We talk about it in every meeting. Every decision I make, it is in consideration of, okay, how is this going to impact the people? I look at people before I actually look at numbers. And I'm just going to be honest, because all money is not good money. There are certain contracts where it looks good on the outside and it's glittery. And yes, it could change the whole trajectory of our organization. But if it impacts people, or if we can't get the right people, or if, it's going to harm, like sometimes, we're because I'm in technology, we could automate ourselves out of things. I've turned down certain things, not only just considering the maturity of our company at this point, but also considering, well, I got this contract, and if I take this on, or if we tell the government, yes, we will take that on as an organization, I may automate certain people out of jobs right now. And I don't want to do that in this environment. Now, somebody else may see that as a bad business decision, but that is my secret sauce to having a team of people that I truly believe will do anything for me, because they know that I do everything I can within reason of business to really support them and to engage with them and to ensure that we have an environment where they know they matter. So honestly, if I had to say, what my secret sauce is, it is really honestly people engagement. I don't have time to tell my story, but I'll say preparation. For the most part, how I prepared was I began to learn everything there was to learn about doing business with the government before I jumped out and got in business. Yeah. So it took me 2 years of just learning things like what was a NAICS code. That wasn't inherent in my previous job as senior program manager at General Dynamics IT. I didn't have to hear that on a day-to-day basis because we didn't necessarily subscribe where I sat in the enterprise section to small businesses and goals and all of that thing. So I had to learn how to do business with a different facet of government because I came from the intelligence community. Right. Preparation was key. Relationships were key. I found out really quick, it's not always about who you know, but it's about who knows you. So I had to go to events. I had to participate. I had to respond on blogs. I had to do things to be well-rounded, to become a thought leader in certain aspects. I'm not a thought leader in everything, but certainly there are certain aspects within my industry that I am really striving on a day-to-day basis to continue to educate myself to be a thought leader. And then lastly, a great marketer. I don't know if I'm a great marketer or not, but what I would say is my degree is in public relations and marketing. So as you can see, everything is about, keeping Breakforth in front of people. I don't care what I'm on. Breakforth is going to be front and center. So I can't necessarily say I'm a great marketer, but I can certainly say I'm intentional about marketing.
Right. Well, I tell you,
I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. I think that's great. I adopted continuous learning, continuous improvement, iterative process that continues to, and I love the saying, it kind of guards me is some folks are promoted to their level of incompetency. And the way to get around that is to keep learning. So for the attendees, I think the lesson and takeaway from what you just said is really just being prepared, making yourself equipped for the opportunity. Chance favors the prepared mind, right? And so I think that's the lesson. And I, the last question I have, and I think you already answered, Nichelle, but is there any additional recommendations you can make to the panel for keeping themselves sharp? And I think we all kind of covered it, but if there was any last comments on that, now's a good time to share it.
That's to me?
No, to either Eugene or
okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said Nichelle.
No, I did, but I acknowledge that you kind of did that. I'll
say one couple super short things. I think the fact that there are people on here that are entrepreneurial in nature, hopefully they know that fear is their biggest enemy, and that taking risk is part of the not risk with your eyes closed. You're talking about preparing, but going. I know so many people who are so close and they just don't do it. And it's like, no, take the chance, do it. You may fail, but like you've talked about, Eugene, earlier, like pick it up and get going. Failure is not bad. Learn from it, move ahead. So I would say, don't walk in fear. And the other thing is that every person, as a pastor, I'm going to say this, every person has an assignment from God. Now, that assignment can be in the business world. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're a missionary in a faraway place or that you're a full-time person at a church. You can, where you are, you have an assignment from God, and He has designed you with a specific purpose to make an impact on the world for His kingdom. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Had to get that in there.
No, that's it. That's it. Any last parting words for participants? Attendees, Eugene?
Pastor Ricky just hit it. I mean, I've spoken about it. I think, smart risk taking and experimentation, being willing to experiment, embrace it, get comfortable with it, make it your friend so that it can sort of, help you succeed. There have been many career opportunities that have come my way. I didn't seek them out. I didn't ask for it, wasn't even looking for it, but I had at least enough sense to say, maybe that's a good move. I'm not sure, but I think it came to my doorstep for a reason. So I'm going to take it. And it time and time again, it has proven to have been like a massive opportunity that I never could have predicted or anticipated or even constructed for myself, even if I wanted to try. And I think that certainly, holds true to, many of the folks on this call and those clients or prospective clients that BVF touches, who are in that entrepreneurial space. You are an entrepreneur because you acknowledge the reward, that comes from taking that risk. So don't, have full courage that you can do it and that you're going to benefit from it.
That's great. That's great. I along those lines, I'm going to tell you, one of the greatest leadership development activities for me was when I came behind you and did the presidency of the Black MBAs. Everything before that was theory. Everything was, MBA class or some type of thing, but to put it in action in that environment and try to really put those principles of leadership and management into play in an organization that I considered a safe environment was monumental, transformational. And I highly recommend volunteering in organizations that allow you to do those things. Definitely. Les, I really appreciate that. And it's funny because I wrote a note, but I didn't speak to it. But what I wrote was the importance of good relationships. Yeah. And I think what you just sort of shared in terms of the relationship that you and I had a chance to forge. Yeah. And here many, many years, decades later, we're sustaining it. Yeah. Was on the basis of building good relationships. Yeah. And acknowledging and recognizing those good relationships that you have in your life. Yes. And how it can benefit you. So I thank you for that. Yes. No, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're going to thank you guys for all your insight. We've made it through the three premises. I think that we've talked effectively about the challenges, about what's coming, and some of the things that folks can do to be equipped and prepared for the coming leadership challenges, and also taking up the mantle of making sure that there's people coming behind us as responsible leaders. So I appreciate your insights. I think that the insights that were provided through the questions and participation were helpful as well. some folks has asked if you guys want to, can you leave some of your contact information in the chat box? If you're comfortable with that, I invite you to do so. So as we close this part of the conversation up, I did want to highlight some of the things that the Black Venture Fund is doing this year. I also wanted to launch a survey, but Zoom is not giving me the box for it. Anyway, so I'm sorry. So, but I did want to highlight what's happening this year. We have a full calendar of programming that is designed to equip entrepreneurs at different levels. Right now, we're having our conference. Next month, we're offering a mini course on a micro subject. We're focusing on financial things such as budgeting and getting funding and some other things that we're still refining. We'll have our 8-week training course that'll occur in March. And then a few different other things. Our next conference like this is scheduled for April sometime. We haven't picked a topic yet. We're hoping to get, whatever the topic is, we're hoping to make it very relevant and very informative about the business environment and what can help our target audience and others who might be interested. So here's our calendar. We invite you to follow us. Participants or attendees to follow us and reach out to us for information. What I will put in the chat box is the link to the application that we're using to get folks to sign up. It is right here. With this link, you can register yourself for an 8-week course. And yeah, so I think we've discussed everything. I wanted to thank you guys officially for your comments. I wanted to invite anybody in the chat room to just give a shout out to these great participants for me. Give them a little iconic hand clap. That would be nice. And I know God will bless you all. We have our social media platforms, of course. I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't offer a shameless plug to our sites and following us and things of that nature. And of course, linking up on LinkedIn and other social media platforms to these professionals is always good. Pastor has a YouTube channel where she interviews guests and things, which is really informative. Our board member Darren was on it recently, so that's something to find her. You can always put that link in the chat box if you like, Pastor. But everybody's giving y'all some kudos in the chat box. I think you guys can see that, and yeah. So let me see if I can. I'm sorry.
One question, is the recording going to be made available after the event?
Thank you. She always keeps me on tack. So this has been recorded. We will post it to our YouTube channel and share it on our social media platforms where it can be reviewed at any point in time. So yes, it will be out there likely by this evening or tomorrow morning. Got to edit, right? We can't release these things without editing them. But yeah, I think that's it. I really want to try to get this survey launched, and I don't know why it's not happening. So all right. So technology is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So,
just for your information, Les, I did post the questions in the chat.
Yes.
So if anyone has time to fill them out, then feel free to do so.
Yes. But bottom line is that I appreciate you guys' participation. I think that what you provided was highly insightful, and anybody that is listening and willing to walk in that advice will really get benefit in the long run. So with that, I am going to ask Nichelle to close us out in prayer, and then we can move on to the next things that we have to do today, correct? If you don't mind, Nichelle.
Thank you so very much. Once again, we want to give deference to the president of this great organization, Mr. Darren Woods, to all of your sponsors, to your board members. Leslie, thank you so much again for putting this together. It certainly has been rewarding. And to my co-panelists, Pastor Patina, it has been a pleasure. And to Eugene Campbell, looking forward to us just doing so many other things together as well, all of us. So with that being said, also, thank you so much for these great attendees. I love the interaction that was going on in the chat, and I was trying my best to respond to everybody. So if I did miss you because it was moving quickly, do know that all of us as panelists did appreciate you for coming out on your Saturday and listening to what we have to say. Let us look to God in prayer, please. Father, we thank you so much for this great day that you ordained even before the foundations of the earth. We are so grateful for all of the lessons that we have learned and for your gifting and your wisdom that you have imparted in us to help us to obtain the principles and the lessons, the strategies that we have in order to inform our leadership. We are just so grateful for the opportunity to be impactful in people's lives. And it is our prayer, God, that we do it in a manner and in a way that is pleasing in your sight. Now, Father, we ask that you bless every attendee in every business that is represented on this call. Father, we thank you, God, that you will provide opportunities, God, that they are capable of stepping into, God. We reject the spirit of fear because you have not given it to them, as this environment projects fear. But we tell them that they do not have the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. Father, we thank you that you have already opened the way for them to get on the other side of this environment. Lord, I thank you that they can be calm and they can be confident in this very thing, that you have begun a good work in them and you will perform it, God. You have given them great ideas. You have given them the business. You have given them the dream. You have given them the vision, God. And for every vision, I am just a firm believer that you will make the provision. Father, continue to bless the president of this organization, Leslie, and all of those that are affiliated, every board member. Continue to inspire them to come up with topics and events, God, that will serve and demonstrate your giftedness and your love and your kindness in the earth for such a time as this. So today we're grateful. Now, as we depart from this section of conversation today, God, let us hold in our heart those principles that you would allow us to hold that will help push us to that next place and to that next level. And Lord, we just bless you and we thank you and we give you the glory. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen. Have a great day, everybody.
Yes, thank you guys. I appreciate you. And we'll be in touch just to have a little download about how this thing went.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.